Good morning, Year 8. I hope you're all well. This is your solutions video for the 20 questions from week 5. So let's get started. So question 1 says, write in figures 69,000, 9 tens and 3 units. So we'll start off with our 69 because that's what we've been given for thousands. Now after thousands come hundreds, but we don't have any of those, but we're still going to have to write our 0 in. Now after hundreds comes tens, and we've got 9 of those, so we can pop that one in. And then finally we've got units, which we've got 3 of, okay, so we can write that in. So our final answer to that one would be 69,093. Next one says 11,305 units. So we can start with our 11 because that's our first one. So we've got thousands, then hundreds, which we've got 3 of, so we've got 300s. Next should be tens, but we don't have any of those, but we've still got to write a 0. And then we've got 5 units at the end, okay? So our final answer should be 11,305. Okay, so the next one is listing the factors. So those are kind of pairs of numbers that when you multiply them together, they make this number. So we always start with 1 and 56. Now it's an even number, so we can do 2. So 2 times what equals 56? So that would be 2 times 28. So 2 and 28 both go into there. Now we've got to figure out what other numbers go in to 56. So it doesn't divide by 3, but it does divide by 4, so we can put 4 here. Now we've got to do 56 divided by 4, so we've got to know what that is, okay? So if we do 56 divided by 4, we would get 14, so we know that 4 and 14 is another pair that can go as our factors of 56. Now 5 doesn't go in it because it doesn't end in 0 or 5. 6 also doesn't go into it, but 7 does, so we can put 7 there, and then we've got to ask ourselves, well, how many times does 7 go into 56? Well, it goes in 8 times, so we can write the number 8 there. So that shows us that there are 8 factors of 56, and we've listed them all there. Next one's a little bit easier, there's not quite as many for this one. So we've got 57, so obviously we start with our 1 and our 57. Now, it's not a prime number, but it's also not even, so we can't have 2, so 2 doesn't go into it. But does 3? Well, 3 does go into it, so if we divide 57 by 3, we would get 19, so we can put 19 in next to our number 3. Now, actually, if we kept going, 4 doesn't go into it, because again, it's not even, nor does 5, because there's no 0 or 5 at the end. Nor does 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, okay? So actually 57 only has those 2 factor pairs. So on to question 5. So we've got 572. So we'll write that out. And then we've got to times it by 1,000. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 0. So we'll add those to the end. And there we've got our final answer, 572,000. Now the next one says 411 times 10. I've only got 1 0 there, so that's what I'm going to add, and that means my answer is 4,110. Next one then. So we've got simplify 48 over 50. Now for this one, let's start by making them a little bit smaller. So let's half both of them. So we'll divide by 2, the top and the bottom. Remember, you've got to do the same to the top of a fraction as you do to the bottom. So if I half 48, I would get 24. And if I half 50, I get 25. Now actually, that's as low as it's going to go, because now they're not even and they don't have anything else in common. So that's our final answer there. So on to the next one, same thing again. So they're both even, so let's make them a little bit easier by halving them, okay? So now we'd have 6 over 30. But that's not going to be our final answer, because actually, what do we think goes into both of these numbers as well? What goes into 6 and 30? Well, actually, the number 6 does. So if I divide that by 6, how many 6s go into 6? Well, only 1. And how many 6s go into 30? Well, it's 5. Okay, so that would be our final answer, 1/5. Okay, on to percentages then. So it says find 75% of 760. So first of all, we're going to find 50%. Now to find 50%, all we do is halve it. So we would do 760 divided by 2. Okay, and that would find us our 50%, which would be 380. So we can write that here. Now, if we want to be able to find 25%, that means we're going to have, well, if we want to find 75%, we've already got 50%, but we need another 25%. Now, to find 25%, all I've got to do is half the 50% that I already found. So if I know that 50% is 380, all I've got to do is divide that by 2, which would equal 190. So now I've got 25% and 50%, which is 380 and 190, and I've just got to add those two together, which would equal 570. So if I add those together, that's my answer. Okay, £570. Now question 10 says I want 25%, so we're going to do the same thing as last time, but we just don't have to do the adding at the end. So if I want to find 50% of 400, I would just do 400 divided by 2, which would equal 200. And then if I want 25%, I'm just going to half the number I just found. So I would do 200 divided by 2 equals 100. So now I know that 25% of 400 would equal £100. On to the next one then. So we want to round 3,113 to the nearest 10. So I'm going to look in my tens column, which is just here, okay? So I can write those two numbers, but then I'm thinking about this column here. So it says it's a 1, and then the number after it, if it's a 4 or below, I can leave it the same, but if it was 5 or above, I'd have to move it up. But luckily it's the same, so I can leave it at a 1 and then put a 0 afterwards. So my answer would be 3,110. The next one says round 407 to the nearest 10. Now this one's a little bit more confusing because if I go to my tens column, I find a 0. Okay, so it's exactly the same principle as before. If the number after so if the number in the unit column is 5 or above, which it is, I'm going to have to move my 0 up 1, so to 1. So this time it would be 410, okay? So the next one is a multiplication, so we're going to do 52 times 7. So we'll do it like we do always, so 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times 5 is 35, but I've got to add my 1 at the bottom, which is 36. So my answer would be 364. Now the next one's a little bit harder because we've got a 3-digit number. So we've got 393, and we're timesing it by 2. So if we do 2 times 3, we get 6. If we do 2 times 9, we get 18, but we've got to pop our 1 down there. And then if we do 2 times 3, we get 6, but then we've got to add our 1 there, which is 7. So we would get 786 for that one. Okay, so the next one says simplify. So it basically just means that we can kind of group all of our letters together. So in this one, they're all B's. I've got 6 B's, I've got 3 B's, and I've got 8 B's. So all I've got to do is add my numbers together. So I've got to add 6 to 3 to 8. So 8 plus 6 is 14, plus the 3 is 17. So I know that altogether I've got 17 lots of B. So that would be that one simplified. The next one's a little bit harder because we've got A's and we've got B's. But we've just got to add them together separately. So I've got 5 A's and I've got 4 A's, which would be 9A. And then I've got 5 B's and 5 B's, which would be 10 B's. Okay, so the answer to that one would just be 9A plus 10B. So that's the answer to the first 16 questions. The next 4 answers will be on the next video, so make sure you watch part 2 to mark all of your work correctly.